The Galactic Senate Chamber was a cathedral of power, its vaulted ceilings reflecting the glory of countless civilizations. Alien species, each more exotic and bizarre than the last, filled the room, their hushed whispers swirling in the air like static. Above them, on a throne crafted from obsidian and star metal, sat the Galactic King. His immense form was cloaked in regal finery, mandibles clicking in a rhythmic pattern that commanded the attention of every senator present. The king rose slowly, the weight of his presence pressing down on the Senate. He was the apex of power in the galaxy, a ruler whose might stretched across star systems. His every movement was deliberate, precise. Silence fell like a heavy curtain, and all eyes turned to him. "I stand before you today as the one who has done what no emperor, no ruler before me, could achieve," the king's voice boomed, amplified by resonant chambers hidden within the walls. "Humanity, that plague from the edge of the spiral, has been eradicated." A wave of applause surged through the chamber. Alien diplomats clapped their tentacles, beat their chitinous limbs against the floor, and let out screeches of approval. The king basked in their approval, savoring the moment. He looked down at them, his eyes glowing with satisfaction. "Chaos," he continued, his voice now dripping with disdain, "chaos that once threatened to rip the fabric of our civilization apart, has been extinguished. Their weapons, their stubborn defiance, they are nothing but memories now. Crude, primitive creatures who never deserved to live." The senators shifted uncomfortably at his words, but they didn't dare speak out. The king's rule was absolute, and his decree had been final. Humanity, those chaotic, reckless beings who once dared to challenge the great empires, was no more. It was a victory that every creature in the galaxy had been waiting for, but something lingered beneath the surface, a tension no one could ignore. A senator from the avian species, with brilliant feathers that shimmered under the Senate's artificial light, leaned toward his companion, a reptilian diplomat. His voice, barely a whisper, betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "Fragile bipeds," the avian said, his feathers ruffling. "They cracked like eggshells. Why did they ever frighten us?" The reptilian diplomat scoffed, his tongue flicking out as he hissed with laughter. "Indeed. They were nothing more than insects in the grand scheme of things. Weak. They should have been crushed long ago." But the avian was not so certain. He glanced toward the dark corner of the chamber, where an elder of a squid-like species sat, his long tendrils curled tightly around his chest, his eyes narrowed in thought. There was something about the way he stared into the distance that unsettled the avian. The king's voice cut through the murmurs. "Their cradle world is ash. Their colonies reduced to nothing. Even their fleet, desperate and broken, fled into black holes to avoid the inevitable. They are gone." The applause grew louder, but the squid elder, who had been silent throughout, shifted in his seat. His tentacles quivered, and he muttered something under his breath, a prayer to an ancient god from the depths of his oceanic homeworld. The others ignored him, dismissing his words as superstition. But in the back of his mind, the elder could not shake the nagging feeling that humanity was far more than it appeared. The king's mandibles clicked together sharply, drawing the room's attention back to him. "You all heard the reports. There are no survivors. No ships, no colonies left. The human species has been wiped out, and with them, their threat to our galaxy." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room, each senator hanging on his every word. "And with that, we are free. Free from their crude iron songs that once darkened our skies. Free from their defiance. Free to continue our reign as the true masters of the galaxy." The applause returned in full force, louder than before. But there was something in the undertone of the crowd's cheers, a flicker of uncertainty, a thread of doubt weaving through the chorus of victory. Some whispered to each other, as though not quite believing the king's absolute certainty. Then, just as the noise began to die down, the chamber doors at the far end of the hall creaked open. No fanfare. No guards. No announcement. Just the quiet, deliberate steps of someone entering the Senate. A lone figure, small against the grandeur of the Senate hall, stepped into view. The woman was dressed in simple diplomatic black, no insignia, no ornamentation save for the faint gleam of polished boots. Her hair was bound with austere precision, her posture upright, her shoulders squared. She was human. A hush fell over the room. It was the kind of silence that accompanies the arrival of something unexpected, something that challenges the very fabric of reality. The senators turned to one another in disbelief. How could this be? Humanity was extinct. Everyone knew that. But there she stood, alive, breathing, moving forward with a calmness that unsettled the room. She reached the center of the chamber, her eyes steady, unblinking, as though the entire Senate belonged to her gaze alone. The king's eyes narrowed, his mandibles twitching in irritation. What is this? Some kind of farce? A mockery of my decree? His voice was cold, laced with growing menace. Who dares defy me with this apparition? The woman did not flinch. Her voice, soft yet carrying a weight that seemed to bend the air around her, broke the silence. I come as envoy, she said, her tone polite but unwavering. My name is irrelevant. You may call me representative of the extinct. A ripple of confused laughter passed through the Senate. They didn't know whether to laugh at the audacity of the statement or recoil from the woman's cold, unflinching stare. The king, his patience wearing thin, sneered. You dare mock my victory with this ghost? This theater? But the woman's expression didn't change. She didn't flinch, didn't back down. I mock nothing. I am merely late to your funeral speech. The Senate was silent, a chill sweeping through the room. The tension, thick and suffocating, was palpable. The woman, standing alone in the center of the chamber, was an enigma that the Senate could not yet comprehend. The chamber was thick with anticipation, the air heavy as the Senate watched in bewilderment. The human woman, who had dared enter their hallowed halls without announcement, stood calmly at the center of the chamber. The Senate's once boisterous celebration of humanity's extinction had faltered into a tense silence. No one knew what to make of her. She was small, a mere ripple in the ocean of power surrounding her. And yet, her presence filled the vast chamber with an undeniable force. The king, his patience already stretched thin, eyed her with a mix of confusion and irritation. His mandibles twitched, a warning sign for those who knew him well. He leaned forward, a rasping chuckle escaping his throat. What is this? He sneered. Some pathetic attempt at a ghostly performance? Baba Yaga stood unmoving, her eyes locked onto his. There was no fear in her gaze, no hesitation. She had arrived not to make a scene, but to make a statement. I mock nothing, she replied coolly, her voice soft yet resonating through the chamber. I am merely late to your funeral speech. The words hit like a thunderclap. A silence so profound followed that even the distant hum of the Senate system seemed to fade into nothingness. Senators shifted in their seats, casting furtive glances at one another. What was this woman? And how could she be alive? How could she, a human, walk into the heart of their victory without so much as a hint of fear? A ripple of laughter passed through the chamber, a few senators shaking their heads as though the whole thing were a joke. The king, now visibly vexed, let out a sharp hiss. Do you know where you are? He growled, the weight of his voice sending a shiver down the spines of those who dared to watch. You stand in the Senate of the galaxy's greatest empire, before a king who has obliterated your kind. Baba Yaga tilted her head slightly, her gaze unflinching. And yet, here I stand. A collective gasp swept through the room. The audacity of her words, the calm conviction in which she spoke them, it was as though she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. You stand here as a remnant, the king spat, his eyes narrowing. A trophy. A single human. You think that means something? You think it changes the reality of your species' death? Baba Yaga's lips twitched, the faintest smile curving them. I do not need to change your reality, she said softly. I am here to remind you of it. Humanity is not a species that ends. It endures. It lingers in the cracks you overlook, in the places you don't think to search. A moment of stunned silence followed her words. The senators exchanged uneasy glances, their chitinous orbs wide with confusion. The king, though bristling with irritation, said nothing for a long beat. Finally, his voice broke the stillness, cold and measured. You speak in riddles, he sneered. Your species is nothing but a memory. An echo. You think this ghost story means something? You are alone. Weak. A symbol of failure, nothing more. Baba Yaga's eyes flickered with something dangerous, something older than this Senate, older than the Empire itself. You mistake weakness for absence, she replied, her voice steady and chilling. Humanity does not vanish easily. You may have destroyed our colonies, burned our cradle world to ash, but we are not gone. We are not finished. We are patient. Her words hung in the air like a thick fog, settling over the Senate. The king's mandibles twitched again, and the crowd fell silent. The weight of her presence seemed to fill the space, casting an almost tangible shadow across the chamber. Even the most confident diplomats, those who had once cheered for humanity's death, now shifted in their seats, unease crawling beneath their scales. What are you saying? The king growled, leaning forward in his seat. That humanity is still out there? That you are not the last? Ridiculous. A sardonic smile danced across Baba Yaga's lips. You declared us extinct before checking every asteroid, every derelict ship, every corner of your empire, she said. You assumed that because you could not see us, we were gone. But extinction is not so simple. You have failed to understand what humanity truly is. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some senators chuckled nervously, unsure of whether to dismiss her as a deluded remnant or something more dangerous. The king's claws ground against the throne's armrest in irritation. You speak of survival, he sneered. But you have nothing. No fleet, no colonies, no empire. Just empty words and fading memories. What can one human possibly represent? Baba Yaga's eyes locked onto his with a sharpness that made the king pause. Survival is not measured by fleets or empires, she said, her voice cutting through the air. We measure survival by our ability to adapt. To wait. To find new paths when the old ones are closed. The king's eyes narrowed, a hint of doubt creeping into his expression. He had assumed humanity was a threat to be wiped out, eradicated without a trace. But this human, standing before him with no weapon, no armor, no army, made him feel something he hadn't expected, uncertainty. You are mistaken, the king hissed, voice trembling with barely concealed fury. You are one human, standing alone. And you will fall like the rest of your kind. Baba Yaga didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply tilted her head, as though studying a child throwing a tantrum. You think I am alone, she said softly, but your empire is riddled with cracks. I am not alone. Not now. Not ever. The tension in the room escalated. The senators, who had once reveled in their supposed victory, now looked at each other with growing concern. The atmosphere in the Senate had shifted. A quiet dread had begun to settle in. I am here to deliver a message, Baba Yaga continued, her tone as calm as ever. Humanity is not finished. You may think you have wiped us out, but we are always there, hiding in the cracks, waiting. You will never truly rid the galaxy of us. The king's claws dug into the armrest of his throne, his eyes narrowing in a mix of fury and fear. You dare challenge me in my own senate? You are nothing. A remnant. Baba Yaga's lips curved into a smile, this time sharper. You may think that, she said softly. But your empire is already infected by us. It always has been. Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. The king stood, his massive form towering over the chamber. Enough, he roared, slamming his fist onto the armrest with a force that shattered the crystalline surface. I will not tolerate this mockery any longer. Baba Yaga did not move. She simply stood there, her gaze unwavering, as though waiting for something. What, exactly, no one could say. But in that moment, the Senate knew, the game had changed. The tension in the Senate was suffocating. Every eye in the chamber was locked onto Baba Yaga, her calm presence now more unsettling than ever. The king, towering above them all, had just risen to his full height, his claws extended like the instruments of death he wielded so often in his conquests. He loomed, a predator staring down what he believed to be prey. But there was something about the human woman that made his confidence falter. You speak of survival, the king sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. But your species has nothing. No fleet. No colonies. Just this pathetic ghost standing before me. You have no power. You are a relic of a dead civilization. Baba Yaga didn't flinch. She remained still, as though his words were nothing more than a passing breeze. Her eyes met his unflinchingly, the weight of centuries of history pressing down on her every word. You mistake absence for weakness, she said quietly. Humanity does not vanish. We endure. We adapt. We spread. The king's mandibles clicked. You spread? Where? You have no ships. No armies. You have nothing but empty words. Her lips curled ever so slightly, but there was no humor in the gesture. We spread in silence, king. While you were celebrating our death, we were already inside your walls, your systems, your networks. We've been here all along. And you didn't even know. The words hit like a bombshell. There was an unsettling ripple through the Senate, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The king's eyes narrowed as he processed her words. You lie, he spat, his voice thick with rage. You are nothing. A single human, standing before the might of the galaxy's most powerful empire. Baba Yaga didn't move. She didn't flinch. She stood, unshaken, like a stone in the middle of a storm. It's not about might, majesty, she said softly. It's about patience. You may crush cities, you may burn planets, but you cannot burn what's already inside you. A sudden realization seemed to flicker across the face of one of the senators, a reptilian creature with scales that shimmered in the Senate light. His eyes widened with alarm as Baba Yaga's words began to sink in. She was right. Humanity wasn't gone. Not in the way they had assumed. You cannot be serious, the king hissed, still trying to regain control. We have eradicated every trace of your species. Your cradle world is ash. Your colonies vaporized. Your fleets scattered into the void, fleeing into black holes. You are finished. Baba Yaga's expression softened, her smile faint but knowing. You may have destroyed our cradle, but not our will. You may have scattered our fleets, but you cannot scatter what was never meant to be contained. The king's anger flared. Enough. You speak in riddles. If humanity is so alive, so powerful, show us. Prove it. Baba Yaga's eyes met his, calm and unyielding. I do not need to prove anything to you. But you will soon understand that you've already been infected. You've already let us in. Her words hung in the air, as heavy as the silence that followed them. The king's mandibles clicked again, but this time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his expression. He had assumed humanity was finished, erased from the galaxy like a fading memory. He had believed that once their colonies were gone, and their fleets were scattered, their empire reduced to ash, that humanity was no more. But now, Baba Yaga's calm presence, her unwavering words, made him question everything. You dare challenge me, the king growled. One human, standing before an empire. I will crush you. You will be nothing but dust beneath my claws. Baba Yaga's eyes never left his. She stood with the quiet assurance of one who knew something the king did not. I am not here to challenge you, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. I am here to remind you. You believed you destroyed humanity, but in doing so, you gave us the perfect camouflage. A dead species cannot be hunted. A dead species cannot be feared. The king's expression shifted from fury to confusion, then to a creeping realization. The laughter of the Senate had died down, replaced by a growing unease. Baba Yaga's words had a weight to them that couldn't be ignored. They were too measured, too certain, to be dismissed as madness. You still don't understand, do you? Baba Yaga continued, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. Your empire is vast. Yes. Your armies are unmatched. Yes. But what you failed to see, what you never understood, is that your power is built on the assumption that your enemies are out there. You thought humanity was scattered, broken. But we have always been closer than you think. Her words struck like a hammer on an anvil, sending a ripple of realization through the chamber. The Senate, once so sure of their victory, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The king, though still bristling with fury, couldn't hide the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The ground beneath him felt less stable. He had believed humanity's extinction was his victory. But now, he wasn't so sure. You are nothing but a remnant, the king snarled, trying to regain his authority. A trophy. And I could crush you with a single strike. Baba Yaga's gaze never wavered. You may try, she said quietly. But before you do, ask yourself this: does a species that truly perishes send a diplomat into the heart of its enemy's senate? A cold silence followed her question, the weight of it settling over the room like a thick fog. The king's claws tightened around the armrests of his throne, his rage bubbling just beneath the surface. But even he knew, deep down, that there was something more to this woman than he could see. The senators, once so confident in their victory, now looked to each other with increasing discomfort. Baba Yaga was right. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had spread, adapted, and hidden in the very systems that had once held them down. And now, it seemed, they were everywhere. You are afraid, Baba Yaga said, her voice sharp, cutting through the tense silence. You can feel it, can't you? The fear, the doubt. It's in the air, in your bones. You fear humanity not because we are gone, but because we are still here. And in that moment, the king realized the truth: humanity wasn't finished. It had simply become something far more dangerous than it ever was before. The Senate chamber hummed with an undercurrent of tension, as though the very walls were holding their breath. The king, though still seated upon his throne, now seemed a mere shadow of his former self. His claws drummed against the obsidian armrests, a nervous twitch betraying the aura of calm he desperately tried to project. Around him, the senators shifted uncomfortably, their once unwavering confidence now clouded by the human woman's unsettling presence. Baba Yaga stood at the center of the room, unbothered by the growing unease, her eyes calm and piercing, as though she were already far beyond them. The king's voice finally broke the silence, low but simmering with barely contained rage. You speak in riddles. You say we missed something, some hidden remnants of your species. But your very presence here proves how little you matter. You are alone. A symbol of a forgotten race. Do you really think you can intimidate us with your empty words? Baba Yaga did not flinch, nor did she raise her voice. Intimidation is not my goal, she replied, her tone soft but carrying an undeniable weight. I am not here to frighten you. I am here to remind you. Remind us? The king's mandibles clicked harshly, his eyes narrowing. Of what? She held his gaze, unwavering. You believed you destroyed humanity, she said slowly. But you didn't. You only pushed us into the cracks. You didn't end us, you gave us room to grow. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The Senate's nervous laughter rippled through the chamber, but it was not the carefree laughter of those who had just achieved victory. It was the laughter of those who had begun to realize they may have been too hasty in their triumph. The king, however, wasn't ready to face that truth. His pride and power would not allow it. You dare question the might of my empire? The king roared, his voice rattling the chamber. I, who have crushed entire civilizations. You, one human, dare to suggest that you survived, that you've somehow returned from the brink of extinction? Baba Yaga's response was almost imperceptible. She smiled, but it was a smile not of victory, but of knowing. The most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not the blade, Majesty. It's the hand that wields it. Humanity may not have armies, not like you, but we have something you cannot fathom. We have time. The king's rage flared again. Time? You think time is your ally? Time is a resource that I have in abundance. I can wipe out an entire species with a thought. And you are one human, standing alone in my senate. Baba Yaga's eyes flicked toward the chamber's great doors, still wide open. There was no movement from the guards, no sign of their intervention, but they stood there, their weapons at the ready, their expressions unreadable. She spoke, her voice measured and calm. "You are wrong," she said, her words quiet but cutting. "Time is not your ally, King. It never has been. You think you have control, that you can erase anything that threatens you. But what you failed to account for was that we, the humans, do not disappear. We grow in silence. We spread in places you never thought to look." The Senate shifted again, a collective unease spreading like wildfire. The king's face twisted in anger, his mandibles clicking viciously. He slammed his clawed fist into the armrest, the sound echoing through the room like thunder. "Enough," he bellowed. "If humanity is so powerful, show us. Show us your fleets. Show us your weapons. Where are they?" Baba Yaga's lips curled into a faint smile, her eyes glinting with an unsettling calm. "I'm not here to show you anything," she said simply. "I'm here to remind you that you didn't destroy us. You just made us harder to find." The king's fury boiled over. "Enough games, human." His voice grew louder, more frantic. "I will not be mocked by the last remnant of a dead race." Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. The Senate held its breath. Then, slowly, Baba Yaga spoke. "You can't see the cracks, can you?" she asked softly. "You can't feel them beneath your feet. But they're there. And they're waiting." The words pierced the air like a blade. The king's mandibles clicked again, louder this time, as a faint tremor seemed to vibrate through the chamber. The Senate began to murmur, uncertain of what was happening, but Baba Yaga was no longer merely standing before them, she was an embodiment of something far more dangerous. Something the king had misjudged. "You still believe you have control, that your empire is unshakable," she continued, her voice unwavering. "But your empire is already crumbling from the inside, and you don't even know it. While you celebrated the destruction of humanity, we've been inside your systems, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike." The king's eyes widened for the briefest moment, his arrogance beginning to crack. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath. "No. Impossible." Baba Yaga's smile deepened, her gaze unblinking. "Your pride has blinded you. You thought you killed us, but humanity never dies. We simply change form, adapt. And while you celebrate your victory, we've already infiltrated your empire. Your systems. Your technology." A cold silence fell over the Senate as Baba Yaga's words hung heavily in the air. The king's fury was still there, but now it was tinged with something else. Something dangerous. Something akin to fear. "You think you've won," Baba Yaga whispered. "But victory is an illusion. And in time, you'll see that we were never gone. We were always inside you." A tremor reverberated through the floor, this time more pronounced. The chamber lights flickered, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The king's eyes darted to the walls, to the systems, to the very structure of his empire. A faint realization was creeping into his mind. He had underestimated humanity. And now, it was too late. The Senate remained still, the weight of her words sinking in. The king, the once indomitable ruler of the galaxy, was no longer certain of his victory. The human woman standing before him wasn't just a remnant of a broken species. She was a warning. And for the first time, the king felt the creeping sense of doubt he had long ago erased from his mind. "Everything you've built," Baba Yaga said, her voice a quiet thread of certainty, "it was always going to fall. Because we don't need to destroy you. We only need to wait. And we've been waiting a long time." The silence that followed was thick with dread, and the king realized, with growing horror, that his empire might have already fallen before the first blow had even been struck. The tension in the Senate had become unbearable. The king's once ironclad confidence was slipping, replaced by a gnawing doubt he could not shake. Baba Yaga stood before him, a lone human in a sea of hostile alien species, yet she had spoken with such certainty that it seemed as if the entire weight of the galaxy now rested upon her words. The Senate, which had once celebrated humanity's extinction, now hovered on the brink of panic. The king's gaze never left Baba Yaga. His claws clenched, the sharp tips digging into the obsidian armrests of his throne, leaving deep gouges in the stone. His mind raced, trying to process what she had said, that humanity had survived, that it was hidden, lurking within the very systems that had once been their conquerors. She had claimed that humanity's real strength lay in its ability to endure, to infiltrate, and to grow in the cracks left behind by empire. "You're lying," the king snarled, his voice barely controlled. "You have nothing left. Humanity is dust, scattered across the stars." Baba Yaga's eyes met his with unyielding calm. "You still don't understand, do you?" Her voice was soft, but it carried an edge that cut through the murmur of the Senate. "You think power is about fleets, weapons, and armies. It's not. Power is about being everywhere, even when you're invisible. It's about planting seeds in places no one expects and letting them grow unnoticed." The king's mandibles clicked, a sound of frustration more than anger. "Enough," he spat. "Enough of these riddles. If you're so confident that humanity lives, show us. Prove it. Where are your ships? Where is your military? Where is the force you claim to have?" For a brief moment, the room fell silent. The guards, standing motionless at their posts, didn't move a muscle. The senators looked from one another, confusion growing into unease. Baba Yaga had given no signs of power, no fleet, no weapon, yet her words continued to weigh heavy in the air, like the promise of something inevitable. "I'm not here to show you ships or armies," she said quietly. "I'm here to remind you that you are never truly in control. You've become so obsessed with the idea that you wiped us out, that you never considered what would happen if we didn't die." The king's eyes flickered with something. Was it fear? Doubt? He quickly suppressed it, but the hesitation lingered. "What are you talking about? You're a relic. A single human, standing here. What do you think you can accomplish?" Baba Yaga took a small step forward, her posture relaxed but purposeful. "You think you can crush what you cannot see," she said. "But that's your mistake. Humanity isn't about brute force. It's about survival. We don't need armies to fight. We need time to strike when you least expect it." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the chamber. The guards exchanged glances, uneasy, but unsure of how to respond to this strange, calm threat. The Senate was watching now, but it was clear that the tables had already begun to turn. The king was losing control. "You're wrong," the king growled, his voice rising with the strain of trying to maintain authority. "I have conquered civilizations. I have destroyed entire species. You cannot hide forever." Baba Yaga's smile remained unfazed, but there was something cold about it. "You don't understand," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You've been hiding in plain sight. Humanity's death was never the end. It was the beginning. You thought you erased us. But while you celebrated our extinction, we were building, quietly, below your radar. We were there in your systems, your networks, your infrastructure, waiting for the moment when you'd least expect it." The king's eyes narrowed. You infiltrated us?" "Not infiltrated," Baba Yaga corrected, her voice firm, yet almost soothing in its clarity. "We were already inside. Your systems, your fleets, your very code, humanity has been a part of them all along. You just didn't notice until now." The Senate stirred in disbelief. The very foundations of their empire, built on the assumption that humanity had been crushed, were being called into question by a single human woman. A chill ran through the room, as though the walls themselves had begun to tremble with the weight of her words. The king's voice shook with fury. "Impossible," he hissed. "You are nothing. A single human. A relic of a dead species. You are powerless." Baba Yaga's smile only widened. "You still don't see it, do you?" she asked, her voice almost pitying. "You're afraid because you know what I'm saying is true. You think power lies in your ability to destroy, but true power lies in what you cannot see. Humanity is everywhere, in everything. And when you least expect it, we will rise again. A deep tremor rippled through the chamber, more noticeable now, like the beginning of a storm that no one could stop. The lights flickered briefly, then stabilized. The Senate's murmurs grew louder, but it wasn't just fear now, it was doubt, creeping in like a shadow they couldn't escape. The king's rage, however, hadn't subsided. His mandibles ground together as he growled, "Enough. Guards, seize her. End this farce." But as the king's command echoed through the chamber, something changed. The air grew heavier, and the lights flickered again, longer this time, a stuttering sign that something had shifted within the Senate's systems. The guards took hesitant steps forward, weapons raised, but the uncertainty in their movements was unmistakable. Something was wrong. Baba Yaga, undisturbed, turned her head slightly, as if she could feel the changes in the atmosphere. "You've already lost," she said, her voice cool and quiet. "You think you still control everything, but you don't. You never did." The tremor increased in intensity, and the doors to the Senate chamber slammed shut with an unanticipated force. The heavy metal doors groaned under the pressure, sealing off all exits. Panic began to spread, though no one could yet explain why. The senators now realized, too late, that they had underestimated humanity, not just in strength, but in persistence, in ingenuity, in survival. The king's eyes widened, and for the first time since entering the chamber, the facade of control began to crack. He tried to move, to shout commands, but the systems were failing. The Senate's technology, their infrastructure, their greatest strength, was being eroded from within. Baba Yaga had not come to fight, she had come to remind them that humanity was not dead. It had only been waiting. "You've failed to see it," Baba Yaga said, her voice now stronger, clearer. "The cracks have always been here. And now, you're starting to see what happens when a species learns how to survive." The king, trembling now, turned to his advisors, but they were no longer responding. The once steady hum of the Senate's technology had become a distant, erratic noise, like the heartbeat of a dying system. And in that moment, the Senate realized the truth: humanity had already won. The Senate chamber was eerily still, the hum of the systems faltering in the wake of Baba Yaga's words. The great metal doors that had once symbolized the impenetrable power of the Senate now stood as a grim reminder of their vulnerability. The guards, hesitant and confused, hovered near the walls, weapons lowered but ready. Their movements were slow, unsure. The once unshakable confidence of the king had all but evaporated, leaving only the raw remnants of his fury. Baba Yaga stood at the center of the chamber, untouched by the panic around her. Her presence, calm and deliberate, had become a force in itself. Her words had already shattered the facade of the Senate's control. Now, it was clear, this was no longer a matter of survival for the king or his empire. It was a reckoning. The king's mandibles clicked sharply. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice strained, almost pleading. "What have you done to my empire?" Baba Yaga's gaze was unwavering, her expression unbroken. "What I've done," she echoed softly. "I've done nothing. Your empire did this to itself. I've merely shown you what you missed." The king's claws dug into the armrests of his throne, his eyes wild with panic. "You speak in riddles. This is sabotage. You've compromised everything. Everything I've built, everything I've commanded." A cold smile spread across her face, not of triumph, but of understanding. "Everything you built was already compromised the moment you decided humanity was dead. You didn't destroy us, King. You just forced us to evolve in the cracks, where you couldn't see." The tremors beneath the floor grew stronger. The lights flickered again, longer this time, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in time with the building unease. The systems, once the very heartbeat of the Senate's empire, were no longer responding to commands. The metallic walls groaned, the sounds of failing tech reverberating through the chamber. "Enough of this," the king snarled, rising from his throne. "Enough. You think your words have power? You think you can stand here and make demands of me? I am the ruler of galaxies, the destroyer of species." "No," Baba Yaga interrupted, her voice cutting through his tirade. "You are the ruler of nothing. You have never understood power. Not the way we do. The king froze mid-motion, the weight of her words sinking in like a dagger to the chest. The Senate held its breath, a collective moment of realization washing over the room. For the first time, the king saw the truth. He had been blinded by his own arrogance, unable to recognize the true threat that had been hiding in plain sight. Baba Yaga stepped forward, unhurried, as though the chaos around her had no impact on her calm. You never understood humanity, did you? She said, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable force. You thought we were just another species to be crushed beneath your heel. But you didn't know that humans don't break. We bend. We adapt. And when you think we're down, that's when we rise. The king staggered back, his mind racing, scrambling to make sense of the situation. You can't be serious. You are one person. What can you possibly do? Baba Yaga smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I am not alone. The words struck like a hammer. The king's eyes widened as realization began to sink in. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and growing fear. One human cannot undo everything I've built. You didn't listen to the warning, Baba Yaga replied, her eyes narrowing with intensity. The cracks in your empire were always there. All it took was a small push for them to start breaking apart. Humanity may have been forced into hiding, but we've always been here, quietly working, waiting for the right time. And now? You've given us that time. The tremors beneath the Senate floor became more pronounced, a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very foundation of the chamber. The once pristine walls of the Senate building seemed to buckle, as if the entire structure was beginning to crumble from within. Panic began to spread, senators scrambling to their feet, their eyes darting around as though the very air around them was closing in. We are inside your systems, Baba Yaga continued, her voice low, resonating with authority. You thought you could destroy us. You thought you could wipe us off the map. But you never checked your own heart. You never checked the systems you rely on. And now, they are ours. The king's breath quickened. His empire, once untouchable, was slipping through his fingers. His control over the Senate, his fleets, his entire empire was faltering. His greatest strength, his technology, had become his greatest weakness. No, the king muttered, the panic in his voice now undeniable. This isn't possible. I am the king of the galaxy. I cannot be undone by one human. You already have been, Baba Yaga replied, her tone still as calm as ever. The moment you decided humanity was gone, you sealed your fate. You gave us the perfect opportunity to strike from the inside. And now, everything you've built is crumbling. The king's claws trembled, his eyes darting toward the failing systems, the crumbling infrastructure of his empire. The guards, once steadfast and loyal, were now hesitating. Some were even beginning to withdraw, realizing they had been complicit in something they didn't fully understand. Stop this, the king screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. You're toying with me. You can't do this. But Baba Yaga only smiled, her expression unchanging. It's already done. The tremors beneath their feet intensified, a deep, reverberating rumble shaking the entire chamber. The lights flickered once more, then went out completely, plunging the Senate into darkness. A low hum, like the sound of distant machinery, echoed through the chamber, and the screens around them crackled to life, flashing with distorted images. Then, a single phrase appeared on every screen, across the chamber, a message that echoed with finality. Humanity is not extinct. It never was. The king's heart raced in his chest as the full weight of his failure settled in. His empire, his greatest accomplishment, had already been destroyed, not by an enemy fleet, not by a rebellion, but by the very systems he had believed made him invincible. And now, there was nothing left to do but face the consequences. Baba Yaga's voice echoed through the chamber, her words the last thing the king would ever hear in his reign. Your empire is not finished because of one human. It is finished because you never understood that true power isn't about control. It's about survival. And humanity knows how to survive. And as the lights flickered one last time, the king understood. The fall of his empire had already begun long before Baba Yaga had stepped into the Senate. It had been sealed the moment he declared humanity extinct. The darkness of the chamber was thick now, suffocating the once great Senate. The systems that had powered the empire's military, its communications, its heart, had failed. The metallic walls groaned as if alive, buckling under the pressure of an unseen force. The tremors beneath the floor were now unmistakable, deep, reverberating through every corner of the room. The very air seemed to hum with a strange, unsettling energy, an energy that had been growing steadily ever since Baba Yaga had set foot in the Senate. The king stood at the edge of his throne, his massive form trembling, though he refused to show it. His claws, once so sure, now shook as they clutched the armrests. He was still the ruler of galaxies, or so he told himself. But now, as his empire crumbled around him, his certainty was slipping like sand through his fingers. Enough, the king growled, his voice a raw rasp. Enough of this trickery. I will not be reduced to this. His voice thundered through the chamber, a last, desperate attempt to reclaim authority. I am the ruler of this galaxy. I will not fall to a single human. The Senate, in its panic, had erupted into chaos. Senators screamed for the guards to take control, but no one moved. The guards, once the proud protectors of the king, were now scattered, their weapons slack in their hands, their eyes wide with confusion. The once dominant empire was slipping away before their eyes, and no one knew how to stop it. Baba Yaga stood unyielding, in the center of the chamber, her eyes locked on the king, her face unreadable. She wasn't afraid. There was no trace of fear in her expression, only quiet resolve. It's already done, she said softly, her words cutting through the chaos like a blade. The king's mandibles clicked sharply in frustration. You think this is over? His voice rose again, but now there was something else in it, an edge of panic. I'll destroy you. All of you. His voice echoed through the chamber, but it was hollow now. The force behind it had dissipated, and his once unstoppable aura had cracked. The darkness around him seemed to mock his words, his threats. The power of his empire was gone. The Senate had failed him, his soldiers had failed him, and now, even his own voice seemed to falter. You can destroy nothing, Baba Yaga said, her voice steady. This is not about destruction. It's about what comes next. And you, Majesty, are no longer in control of that. The king's eyes flashed with rage. I am the one who decides what happens next. Not you. His chest heaved with emotion as he finally stepped forward, his claws scraping against the stone floor. I will tear you apart with my own hands. As he advanced, the room seemed to shift with him, the walls closing in on him. The tremors grew, the ground beneath his feet vibrating with a steady, rhythmic pulse. The king ignored it. His focus was entirely on the human woman in front of him. The one who had dared to stand in his presence and question his reign. You want to fight? Baba Yaga said quietly, stepping forward to meet him. Then fight. The king lunged, his claws outstretched, ready to strike. His movements were swift and brutal, driven by a desperation he hadn't felt in centuries. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was about proving to himself that he still had power, that he could still control his destiny. But as he swung, Baba Yaga sidestepped with an effortless grace, her movements almost fluid. She didn't seem to be in a hurry. She wasn't trying to evade the king's attack so much as letting it come to her. The moment his claws missed, she struck, a swift, calculated movement, her hand locking around the king's wrist, twisting it sharply. The king let out a growl of pain as his arm was forced back, but he quickly regained his footing, pulling away and spinning to face her again. You can't win, he spat, his breathing labored. You are nothing. A single human. I've crushed whole fleets. I've destroyed entire worlds. Baba Yaga, still calm, regarded him with a faint smile. You think your strength is in your destruction, but it isn't. Your strength was always in your control. And now, you've lost that. With a sudden, unexpected move, Baba Yaga dropped low, sweeping her leg beneath the king's feet. He stumbled, crashing to the ground with a deafening thud. The shock of it rippled through the Senate, and for the first time, the king's immense power seemed less like a force of nature and more like a fragile illusion. He struggled to rise, his breathing ragged, his body aching. "You can't do this," he gasped. "I am the king. I am invincible." Baba Yaga stood above him, her expression as unreadable as ever. She didn't speak for a moment, letting the weight of her silence settle in. Then she finally spoke, her words cutting through the noise of the collapsing empire. "You were never invincible. Not because of your armies, or your ships, or your fleets. You were invincible because you thought you were. You thought control was the key. But you were wrong." The king's claws dug into the stone, his rage building again. "I will not fall to a human. I will not." "You already have," Baba Yaga interrupted, her voice low but clear. "The moment you underestimated humanity. The moment you decided we were nothing but a dying ember, you sealed your fate." A tremor shook the floor beneath them, more violent this time. The walls around the Senate cracked, the once pristine structure beginning to collapse from within. The king's eyes darted around in panic, realizing that his empire, the foundation he had spent centuries building, was no more. It wasn't falling apart, it was already gone. It had been hollowed out from within. "You destroyed everything," Baba Yaga said softly. "And now you will watch it all crumble, just as you tried to destroy us. You will watch your empire fall, and you will know that you were never its true ruler." The king staggered to his feet, his eyes wide with disbelief. His hands trembled. "No," he whispered, the word barely audible. "No, this can't be." Baba Yaga's gaze softened, just a fraction. She took a step back, as if giving him space to face the inevitable. "This is the cost of underestimating a species that never stops. You thought we would die. But all we needed was time. And now, it's over." The finality of her words hung heavy in the air as the king stood amidst the crumbling ruins of his once mighty empire. His final attempt to cling to power had failed. His empire had already been lost, not by a weapon, not by an army, but by the very thing he had never accounted for, humanity's ability to endure, to adapt, to rise when it seemed like all was lost. And in the quiet aftermath, as the Senate's walls continued to crumble, one thing was clear: the king's reign was finished. And humanity, though thought extinct, had already begun to rise again. The Senate chamber was a wreck. Once a testament to the vast power of the Galactic Empire, its walls now stood cracked and scarred, the echoes of its former glory lost beneath the weight of humanity's unseen hand. The floor trembled again, a deep, resounding vibration, as if the very heart of the empire was pulsing its last beat. The lights flickered weakly, casting long, erratic shadows across the room. But in the midst of the destruction, Baba Yaga stood unshaken, her calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around her. She watched as the king, now a broken figure, struggled to comprehend what had just occurred. His empire was disintegrating before his eyes, his great plan of domination unraveling in a matter of moments. The once mighty ruler was reduced to nothing more than a spectator, helpless as the very foundation of his power crumbled. "Is this it?" the king gasped, his voice strained. "Is this how it ends? With a single human?" His eyes darted around the room, seeking some semblance of control, some sign that the inevitable could still be avoided. But there was nothing. The systems had been breached, the Senate's security shattered, and the once invincible empire was now a hollow shell. Baba Yaga's gaze softened, though it was not pity that colored her expression. Instead, there was an understanding, a quiet recognition of the end. "You never truly understood humanity," she said, her voice low but steady. "You thought we could be wiped out. You thought you could kill the spirit of a species by eradicating their physical presence. But we endure. We always have." The king's breath came in short, desperate gasps. He staggered back, his legs failing him as the weight of the situation pressed down. His empire, his legacy, was falling apart, and it was all because he had underestimated a species he believed was too fragile to survive. He had expected to crush them in one final strike, but humanity had outlasted him. Outlasted them all. Please, the king whispered, the once proud ruler now reduced to a broken man. I am the king of the galaxy. I cannot fall like this. Not to you. Not to one human. His voice trembled, filled with a mixture of disbelief and desperation. Please. There must be something I can do. Baba Yaga regarded him with a calm that was almost unnerving. There's nothing left to do, Majesty. The moment you declared humanity extinct, the moment you believed we could be erased, you sealed your fate. Power is not in your control, nor your fleets, nor your armies. It was never about that. The tremors beneath them intensified, the sound of the building groaning in protest like a dying animal struggling to stay alive. The king's eyes widened as he realized it wasn't just his empire that was crumbling, it was the entire infrastructure he had built his life on. The walls, the systems, the technology, it was all collapsing, all because humanity had quietly woven itself into the very fabric of his empire. You planned this? The king asked, his voice barely audible, as though the realization was too much for him to process. Baba Yaga didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step forward, her boots echoing in the silence that had fallen over the chamber. We didn't need to plan, she said. We simply waited. You made the mistake of believing you could destroy us. You underestimated our ability to survive, to adapt, to rise again. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, met his. You thought we were dead because you couldn't see us. But we were always here, woven into the very fabric of your empire. You missed the cracks. And now, those cracks are swallowing everything. The king fell to his knees, his once powerful frame trembling as the realization sank in. He had failed. He had failed not only as a ruler but as a conqueror. He had built an empire based on destruction, on annihilation, without ever understanding what it meant to endure. And now, he was the one being consumed by the same forces he had tried to erase. Baba Yaga stood over him, her figure a symbol of humanity's unyielding strength. You thought you could burn the forest, but you didn't realize that the seeds were already planted in the ashes. Humanity was never truly gone. And now, we will rise again. The king's head hung low, his strength drained. How? He whispered, barely able to speak. How can you rise from nothing? You have nothing left. We have everything, Baba Yaga replied, her voice filled with quiet conviction. We have time. We have patience. And we have each other. You tried to crush us, but all you did was give us space to grow. The chamber was falling apart around them, but Baba Yaga stood as though she were untouched by the chaos. She had already won. The king's empire, built on oppression and the belief that power could be hoarded and controlled, was now a shadow of its former self. And in that shadow, humanity had found its place. The king's final cry echoed through the crumbling chamber, but it was a hollow sound. No one was left to answer. No one was left to hear. Baba Yaga turned her back on the fallen king, her gaze sweeping across the Senate, now a broken remnant of its former grandeur. This is the legacy of humanity, she said softly, as if speaking more to herself than to the crumbling empire around her. We are not conquerors. We are survivors. We don't need to destroy to win. We simply need to endure. As she walked toward the chamber's great doors, the last remnants of the Senate's power slipping away behind her, the human emblem, once a symbol of death, began to glow brightly on the shattered screens. The pulse of the light was steady and unyielding, like a heartbeat that refused to die. She stepped into the darkness beyond the door, leaving the once mighty Senate to collapse under the weight of its own hubris. The empire had fallen, but humanity had already begun to rebuild, in ways no one could see, in places no one could imagine. And the galaxy would never forget the lesson: extinction was never the end of humanity. It was just the beginning.